Day 718 of the Trump administration, and we've added a second tally these days. This was day 17 of the partial government shutdown, which by the end of this broadcast will become the second longest in our history as a nation. The president is now turning his attention to television, specifically going on television, as he put it today, to, quote, address the nation on the humanitarian and national security crisis on our southern border Tuesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern. And just tonight, House Speaker Pelosi, Senate Minority Leader Schumer are asking indeed for equal time so the Democrats can respond. In addition to his televised address, Trump plans now a trip to the southern border on Thursday. The big question is whether the president will use tomorrow evening's speech to declare some sort of national emergency, and there is great disagreement over what powers that may grant him to try to build his own wall or steel fence along the southern border. He first floated the possibility last week and repeated it again yesterday.
We're looking at a national emergency because we have a national emergency. Just read the papers. We are looking at it very strongly, but hopefully we can do it this way.
Vice President Pence earlier today said Trump had not made up his mind about declaring a national emergency, but that the office of the White House counsel is looking into the legality of such a move. Phil Rucker, standing by to join us, is the co-author of the latest reporting in the Washington Post tonight. He and his colleague Robert Costa write, quote, such a move would be a fraught act of brinksmanship at the dawn of a newly divided government, sparking a firestorm with House Democrats and certain challenges in federal courts. But Trump believes forcing a dramatic reckoning by executive action may be necessary given the Democratic resistance and the wall's symbolic power for his core voters, officials said. More on that in a bit. Tomorrow afternoon, the VP and Trump's head of Homeland Security will head to the Hill to tend to Republicans. And here's how fraught the politics are. Politico reporting tonight, House Republican leaders fear increasing numbers of their own. Their lawmakers could cross the aisle this week to vote for Democratic bills to keep the government open. Meanwhile, there are no new meetings scheduled between the administration and House Democrats, coming off a weekend of no progress. And with the stalemate, the White House has come under fire for its claims about the number of known or suspected terrorists alleged to have entered the U.S. over and across the southern border. White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders tried to slip a specious number past Chris Wallace yesterday morning on Fox News.
We know that roughly nearly 4,000 known or suspected terrorists come into our country illegally. And we know that our most vulnerable point of entry is at our southern border.
I know this statistic. I didn't know if you were going to use it, but I studied up on this. Do you know where those 4,000 people come, or where they're captured? Airports.
Not always, but certainly a large number.
The State Department says there hasn't been any terrorists that they found coming across the southern border from Mexico. It's by air, it's by land, and it's by sea. It's all of the above. But they're not coming across the southern border, Sarah. They're coming and they're being stopped at airports.
They're coming a number of ways. There's certainly, I'm not disagreeing with you that they're coming through airports. I'm saying that they come by air, by land, and by sea.
Well, today, our colleague here, Julia Ainsley, reported, quote, U.S. Customs and Border Protection encountered only 6 immigrants on the U.S.-Mexico border in the first half of fiscal year 2018, whose names were on a federal government list of known or suspected terrorists, according to CBP data obtained by NBC News. 6 of them. While we learned today that the administration is taking steps to ensure that the shutdown will not affect the ability of the IRS to process tax refunds, we are just days away from the next payday for many of the 800,000 federal workers who will not see their checks. The president was asked about those workers this weekend.
Mr. President, can you relate to the pain of federal workers who can't pay their bills?
I can relate, and I'm sure that the people that are on the receiving end will make adjustment. They always do. But many of those people that won't be receiving a paycheck, many of those people agree 100% with what I'm doing.
But here now is the reality for so many families that just don't have the ability to miss a pay period. Our colleague Vaughn Hilliard spoke to one federal worker out in Colorado.
It's also not just an impact to the family because they see that their dad can't go to work, but and it's hard to say it. It really is. It's a big impact. Excuse me. The feeling of uncertainty is hard.
Why is it hard?
Because you have to be strong for your kids. We're not. We don't ask for handouts. It's tough. It's tough to wake up and have your wife reassure you that everything's going to be all right. We're people. This isn't a game, right? I personally don't care who's right or wrong. We just want to work, want to pay our bills. We just want to be in and live our lives.
That, ladies and gentlemen, is a federal worker. And with that, let's bring in our leadoff panel on a Monday night. All three returning veterans. Philip Rucker, Pulitzer Prize-winning White House bureau chief for The Washington Post. Annie Carney, White House reporter for The New York Times. And Nancy Cook, White House reporter for Politico. Phil, as emotional as that is, and as abrupt a reminder to everyone watching that these are families, many of them, choosing between gasoline and childcare and food and medicine and those kinds of things, because it's hard to just take away a pay period or two, God forbid. I want to show you a bit of Sean Hannity's broadcast tonight. Phil, we'll talk about it on the other side.
Drugs are pouring across our borders, leading to even more death and more destruction. Human trafficking, drug trafficking, violent offenders. Without a doubt, this is a national emergency. It's time to build the wall. The president is right to fight to protect American lives.
Phil, is it me, or could he be possibly laying the groundwork for the president to declare a national emergency tomorrow night?
Well, it's not the first time, Brian, that his show has been in sync with this White House. And I think he is very much helping the White House lay the groundwork for that. We saw that today. I was in a briefing at the White House this afternoon with Vice President Pence, Homeland Security Secretary Nielsen, and they must have said the word crisis a dozen, 2 dozen, 3 dozen times. That's the takeaway. This is a crisis, they're trying to say, a humanitarian crisis, but more importantly, they point out a security crisis, and they're using the numbers that Sarah Sanders tried to use on Fox News Sunday with Chris Wallace yesterday to build a case. You know, critics say it's not true, that it's not based on fact, but nonetheless, it is the case that they're building. It's the case I expect the president will build tomorrow night in his primetime address, and then he's going to be visiting the border on Thursday, all designed around applying more pressure, ratcheting it up to try to get Congress to move on constructing this wall.
Annie, is this now the Trump's, the president's last and only stand? I'd love to ask a loftier question, but what do you think is going on?
What the people I'm talking to are bracing themselves for the possibility that he does declare a national emergency tomorrow. Democrats now think it's his only way out of the bind. He didn't expect to get here. The White House didn't have a plan and didn't expect to be here, and he needs a way out. If he goes that route, he will open himself to huge court battles and lawsuits. The primetime address, though, is something that the White House has been wanting to do for a long time and looking for the right moment to do it, this Oval Office address. They've asked for 8 minutes from the networks. It's a different sort of form for the president. We don't usually see him speak for such a short period of time on script. So if he doesn't actually declare the national emergency tomorrow, I think Phil's right. It's part of this crescendo of crisis that the White House has been building behind closed doors with staffers over the weekend, with Democratic staffers and Republican staffers on the Hill, with reporters today in a briefing, with this trip to the border later this week. They're also trying to, shore up Republican support, who fearing that Republicans could defect and vote for the House bill to reopen parts of the government. They want to create this growing sense of urgency about a crisis.
Nancy, as you know, this will be the president's first address from the Oval Office as president. For all those who think such things are reserved on a need basis, I share from Maggie Haberman on Twitter tonight, basically echoing what Annie just said. A former administration official messages that an Oval Office address was discussed during the tax push as a potential closing argument. It worried some aides that he would have no crowd to draw energy from. Others said he'd done fine during the State of the Union address, so they decided to reserve it for a moment or a crisis. Well, Nancy, here's your crisis. What's your audience? Is it wavering Republicans who by now have forgiven talk of the wall and are ready to get behind steel slats?
Well, really, I think the audience is twofold. One is the general public. I think that Trump is speaking to his base. We saw that with, Sean Hannity's show tonight. But then, two, really, a lot of this crescendo, as Annie and Phil have said this week, is geared towards congressional Republicans. We saw Republicans this week, like Senator Susan Collins or Senator Cory Gardner, say that Republicans should pass funding bills to reopen parts of the federal government while debating the wall. Those are people who are up for 2020. And so much of this White House messaging is geared towards just keeping Republicans on board and keeping them, making sure to try to rally the public behind them and pressure the Republicans to stay in a block. They don't want Republicans to start falling in line with the Democrats and suggesting that the funding bill should pass and the shutdown should end.